Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome once more for Views on the News.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? I played the outro as a mistake for the intro. Anyway, we're an international panel as usual, and we start with my co-host Tersia from South Africa. Welcome, Tersia. Thank you for coming.
Nice to be here again.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Dread Pirate Higgs from British Columbia, Canada. Thank you, Dread, for coming.
Ahoy.
And we have Paul Clark from a little way down the road in England. So we're England heavy today. Never mind. It's
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Paul. So the first item of news is about what David, who can't make it tonight, David and Guy sent their apologies because they've got an outbreak of family. And so what David calls the muddle east is muddling on as usual. And this time it's about Hezbollah, which, as you know, is a more powerful Islamist group than Hamas, as if Hamas were not enough trouble. But they're on the northern border of Israel in Lebanon, and they have been hurling missiles into Israel. It's been described as low intensity fighting at the moment since October, when Hamas invaded Israel, but they want to show their sympathy towards Hamas. So why do these factions always begin with H? Anyway, it's Hezbollah and Hamas, and they've been repeatedly targeting Israel's territory. And people are worried because, of course, we've already got one conflict going on between Israel and Gaza. And now it looks as though there's a possibility of escalation. So it's not good news. And one commentator, a former officer, I think, of Hezbollah, Avi Melamed, told the Daily Express that there remains a considerable risk that the growing crossfire could accidentally result in a much bigger direct confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, guys?
Well, I know Canada has taken the position that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
I think back in 2012, they withdrew any diplomatic ties and go through the Italian ambassador. And so anyway, I'm behind Canada on that one for standing up against Hezbollah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I think Hezbollah is quite an extraordinary organization, isn't it? It's a state within a state.
Yes.
In Lebanon. And I think its army is more powerful than the Lebanese army.
Yes.
And they're battle hardened. You know, they were fighting in Syria for quite a long time. They fought the Israelis.
Yes.
It's a terrible development, isn't it, for everybody in the region?
Yes, and they're both supported by Iran, of course. The weaponry is coming from there.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's terrible for the entire world. Not that we've had world peace really, but we seem to be on a precipice that we have not been since maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis or something in that order. Mm-hmm. So I just wish that there was a solution there is a solution, but it's all long-term solutions, because it's educating people to be critical thinkers, because then we'll tackle problems of this nature completely differently than we do now. But I don't see any quick solutions, and sometimes I feel like I just want to surrender to the universe and just say, well, what will be, because one, at a psychological level, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I just feel I'm just grateful that I don't have babies anymore, or I can see myself, my former religious self, grabbing hold of the Bible and holding fast to that.
Well, that's
right.
Yeah, I get why that would be a comfort. It no longer is, but okay, so basically what I'm saying,
I think there was an article in the news in Britain recently that a lot of people have stopped watching the news.
Yes, there was.
Because it's too depressing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all feel powerless over here, don't we? Because what can we do to influence these idiots that are just tearing lumps out of each other?
Yeah.
I think it's worse than us being far away from the conflict, feeling powerless. Can you imagine how it doesn't affect us directly? It affects us indirectly in things like economics and the oil price and things like that. But can you imagine how much more powerless one feels when you're living in that region and you have absolutely no control over what's happening? So maybe we are in a matrix.
I think Lebanon is in any case in an acute state of crisis, isn't it? It's an acute state of political crisis and economic crisis.
Yes.
The last thing Lebanon needs
is a war.
To get dragged into a war.
Absolutely. Yeah. They had the disaster in Beirut when the fertilizer storage unit blew up, didn't they? Yeah. So I'm going to take a departure from our usual format and show you some little clips about how the Islamists are just entrenched in anti-Semitism. They really don't like the Jews. Watch this.
اللهم عليك بيهود شل أركانهم ودمر كيانهم اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود فلقد اقترب يوم ذبحكم وصالكم والقضاء عليكم حتى لا يبقى يهودي ولا صهيوني على وجه هذه الأرض عقيدتنا في قتالكم أننا سنبيدكم على بكرة أبيكم ولن نبقي منكم أحدا اقتلوهم حيث ثقفتموه ما فيش بنعرفش حدد وين ما بنستطيع سنقاومهم التي يتبر فيها ملكهم ويباد فيها أبناؤهم
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم اللهم أحصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
Many of them, they were speaking at the Hamas parliament. I mean, we want a two-state solution, but how are we ever going to make those entrenched, dogmatic, hating people live alongside each other? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I mean, Israel's been trying to accommodate a two-state solution for decades, right? At least a couple decades. And the Palestinians just won't have it.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the river to the sea. That is not a phrase or a slogan of compromise.
No.
That is one of genocide and destruction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think an appalling thing is that there are people on the left in the Western world who regard Hamas as friends.
Right.
And there are political leaders on the left, former leader of the Labour Party, who will not say that Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
Even after the October the 7th atrocities.
Yeah. How ill-informed are those people? Yeah.
Useful idiots, I think, is the term, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you want to see another little clip like that? 55 seconds.
Sure.
Yeah. Try this one. Let me see if I've got it right. That was how it used to be when the Muslim part of the world was westernized.
Right.
Before they got a grip of government and introduced the burqa. There's a similar one to that. Watch this one.
About 40,000 Palestinians have been killed.
How many are back?
Actually, so they're named and identified.
24,000 people have been named.
Estimates are currently at...
Okay, let me give it to you like this. You ready for this? I'll give it to you very simple. You don't want people to die? There have been 17 ceasefire opportunities on the table for Hamas to accept since October. 17. What are the two requirements? Hold on, what are the two requirements? What are the two requirements? Release the hostages, Hamas disarms. If they really cared about their people, they would be demanding that Hamas and the international community would be putting pressure on Hamas to accept one of those ceasefire opportunities. 17. We are now in month 8. Don't give me that. Don't give me that. Hold on. I want to add another thing. I want to add another thing. War is inherently bloody. This is war. We did not ask for this war. They started a war with us. If you don't want people to die, don't start a war. But you know what bothers me the most? What bothers me the most is the tragedy selectivism. Okay? Because if you're going to go ahead and make problems that Israel is defending themselves in a war, where were you when Bashar al-Assad killed 500,000 Muslims? Where were you when in the Yemen Civil War 450,000 Muslims were killed? And as you and I speak, safe in America, there are 1.2 million Muslims in Chinese internment camps. Where are you fighting for them? But you choose Israel, the singular Jewish state, defending themselves against radical terrorism. I rest.
Good for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I'm a lifelong liberal, but I'm leaning further to the right as this pans out, I'm afraid. And it just seems to me that Christianity used to be horrible, hundreds of years ago, witch burning and stuff. But the one we've got to fear at the moment is Islam, fundamentalist Islam.
Yeah. And of course,
sorry.
The moment you criticize Islam, you're considered Islamophobic.
Yeah.
And then they dogpile you.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
I personally find fundamentalist Christianity pretty scary too.
Yeah.
You've got people in the United States who, I think when we spoke last week, I said these people actively want the situation in the Middle East to get worse.
Yes.
Because they think this will bring about the rapture and so forth.
Yeah.
Fundamentalist Islam is pretty scary, but so is American fundamentalist Christianity.
Yeah.
I think in Britain, to a large extent, Christianity has been defound.
Yeah. Mm. Indeed. Yeah. So I don't really want to spend the whole show on the horrors that are prevalent at the moment, but I'm afraid they've had the Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia recently, and of course they're suffering from very high temperatures, global warming or climate change. And so far, it depends who you believe, but I think a pretty rigorous figure is hundreds of people have died in their pilgrimage. And some people tell you it's 550. Other sources say it's 600. Then other sources say it's 1,000. But do you think it's a good idea to go on a pilgrimage in a country that's boiling hot?
I think the whole pilgrimage thing is outdated.
Yeah.
Well, it's an extremely lucrative exercise. Let's put it like that. It's a brilliant economic injection. So we have in South Africa, we have Zion. They call it the Zionist Church. I'm not sure what their connection to Judaism is. It's more like a blend of fundamentalist Christianity with indigenous religions. And every Easter, there's very similar to a pilgrimage that goes up to a small town it's in the Free State called Moriah, named after a place in Israel. And every single year, people go up in their thousands, and there are numerous bus accidents where people die in horrific road accidents. It's the same, but it's never ceased, because it's a money-making scheme.
Wow.
And the Hajj is that in particular. The cost to go it's preposterous.
But you're as a Muslim, you're expected to do it at least once in your lifetime.
If you can at all afford it, yes. And people will save up their entire life savings.
Yes.
To go on this trip once.
Yes.
But besides, so I and when we talk about these the fundamentalism and the war and the escalation of fighting, I've mentioned it before. I can't get away from the monetary origin, perhaps. I don't know if it's because somebody is somebody's manufacturing these weapons. Both it's not different weapons that are being sold to Hamas and Hezbollah and to the Israeli Defense Force. Who is ultimately reaping the most benefit? And I mean, if only the world would be more Christian, then we would be money is the root of all evil,
Well, it's not just the munitions manufacturers. I would maintain that the very agents of a religion are also in a commercial business, because they have created this non-evidential deity that they represent, self-chosen here on earth, and they're asking for donations all the time. The whole thing is an enterprise.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, no doubt there.
And some of them are doing very well out of it.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Absolutely.
And they don't care that, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims have come from low-income nations where they've had little healthcare available to them. So they're already vulnerable, and they don't care that maybe 2 million people in Saudi Arabia puts a strain on the services that are available, and communicable diseases can be spread amongst these masses. They don't care about that, do they?
No.
I think the other thing is it's becoming unsustainable, isn't it?
Yeah.
That when the Hajj was first laid down, presumably there were 1 million or 2 million Muslims, or hundreds of thousands of Muslims, and now there's 1 billion.
Yeah.
And in future there's going to be more, and hopefully living standards will rise, so more people will feel obliged to do it, and eventually it's just going to be well, maybe it's already unsustainable. If you're getting hundreds or 1,000 people killed regularly. I mean, it's not the first time, is it?
No.
Perhaps the whole thing has become unsustainable.
Will they realize that and respond to it, though? That is the question. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the UK, where we're having a general election. Okay. And if you're a candidate for an election, you're a target for having everything you've ever said before on the internet scooped up and thrown back at you. Okay. So there's a candidate. He's actually an independent. He's not representing a party, but he's standing in Birmingham, and he actually came third in the West Midlands mayoral election in May, and he's now according to the polls, he's got 31% of the vote in Ladywood, a constituency in Birmingham, and the Labour candidate has only got 37%. So there's close race at the moment, but apparently some time ago he was on a podcast and he said 70% of hell will be women.
Yes, because 70 women can easily be tortured by 30 men. I can imagine that.
There you go.
Well, he was supported in this podcast by another Muslim. It's a Muslim-based podcast in the West Midlands here. And one of them is a former apprentice contestant. And he said that the majority of followers of Dajjal, which is in Islam, that's the name of a false messiah or liar. And he says that the majority of his followers will be women who had been empowered, and that's when the other candidates said that 70% of them will be going to hell. They really don't like women.
No, certainly don't want them to have power.
No, certainly not. No, they should be obscene and not heard. Yes, I know. So getting on that subject, because they were discussing about women making money by dancing on TikTok. Now, who are they making money from? Eh? But so having seen a TikTok dancing woman, one of the this is a restaurant owner who was also on the podcast, Mohammed Sanwal. He said, I personally would give her a backhander. I'm not joking. So they're very keen on physically punishing women, except that one of the correspondents on the show said, we don't want to get cancelled. Because, of course, we're all up against platforms now that can de-platform us.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I read once that Islamic countries are right at the top of the league for use of internet pornography.
Yes.
And that in the USA, it's the Bible Belt that's right at the top of the league for internet pornography.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a degree of hypocrisy.
Absolutely. You deprive people of relations with the opposite sex. What do they do, eh?
Just a degree.
Religious repression is, what leads to that for sure. The more you suppress or repress the natural urges of human beings, the more they're going to subvert other ways to get there, right?
Indeed. Yeah. Sorry, Tersia, you were saying?
I was just saying, just a degree of hypocrisy.
I was being kind.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an understatement, I'd say.
Yeah. Isn't hypocrisy a polar thing? You either are or you aren't. Yeah. Anyway, Jess Phillips, who I think she's the deputy leader of the Labour Party at the moment. But
no, she's not the deputy, but she's a very popular Labour MP.
Yes. Okay.
Deputy is Angela Rayner.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So formerly, Jess was the shadow domestic violence minister. I mean, doesn't it tell you something that you've got to have what about, culture, society, when you've got to have a domestic violence minister? I'm sure we didn't. Back in the days of Miss Marple, did we have a domestic violence minister? I don't think so. Anyway, she has said, because her trade, she's a lawyer, and she said, I've handled many cases of domestic abuse in Birmingham, and the women beaten and raped weren't laughing. These attitudes have no place in our democracy. This candidate should explain to the 50% of constituents in Ladywood who are women, and to all the decent men too, how they can possibly trust that he will work for them when he is sharing these awful views. I wouldn't vote for him, would you?
No.
Well, the sad thing is that women often contribute to violence against other women, because there are many fundamentalist religious women who actually condone this view of men.
I know.
And that is something that I still see on the internet, and that is not uncommon, that you have women teaching their daughters that you have to be virginal and things, and women who condone this.
Submissive, yeah. Why do women sign up for that? I don't know.
Yeah. You know, up where I'm working here in Fort St. John, there's a significant population of Hutterites, which are, you know, a branch of the Mormons or of Mennonite descent. And they're anachronistic, you know, so they act like it's, 1700 or whatever. And, the women are all, trained essentially from birth to be subservient to men, to not participate, in men's stuff. And there's a big division based on the sexes. It's horrible to see.
Yeah. You don't have that in Pastafarianism, do you?
No, of course not. No.
I used to work in language schools, and we taught a lot of Saudi students. And I think in the last 15 years or so, we started to get Saudi women. And one of the first women we got, she turned up one summer. She was a 16-year-old Saudi girl. Her dad brought her along to the school. No veil, nothing of any kind, lots of makeup, and a T-shirt with the words, "I'm the girl your mother warned you about." Emblazoned on the T-shirt. And I thought, good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get those.
I wondered, how she found life in Saudi Arabia. I never got to ask her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we would get other Saudi Arabian girls who would come along, and they would come along in a veil, first of all.
Yeah.
And then eventually it would change to a hat.
Yeah.
And then after a few weeks, a little bit of hair would start to show out of the hat. And maybe after 3 months, the hat would come off.
Yeah.
Like that. It took a lot of them a long time to dare. I think they would have felt half naked.
Yeah. Were you sexually inflamed by a sight of a wisp of hair, Paul?
Oh. I mean, they'd have their veil and skin-tight jeans.
Yes, right. And beautifully manicured hands too. Yes, doing everything they could to appeal sexually, except for the bit that's their hair. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm sorry. Now we're going to the US of A, and we don't have David here to defend it. So we can really run amok, can't we? Yeah. So you won't be surprised to hear that the largest Christian university in the country is subject to a class action lawsuit against them for running a deceitful racketeering scheme, because they lied to the pupils, the victims, the students about their tuition costs. No. Apparently, yes, shocking, isn't it? Yes. So apparently, in addition to this class action, which of course is brought by a number of ex-students, plaintiffs, there's been an action brought by the US Department of Education, and they fined this university, which is Grand Canyon University, I think that's in Colorado, $37.7 million over similar complaints. So they found in their investigation that 7,500 former and current students were lied to about the cost of the doctoral programs over several years. And the chief of the FSA, the Department of Federal Student Aid, said, FSA takes its oversight responsibilities seriously. GCU, the Grand Canyon University, their lies have harmed students, broken their trust, and led to unexpectedly high levels of student debt. And they explained that they're holding them accountable. So there's some good coming out of it, but none of us are surprised that this is being perpetrated and that correction is necessary, are we?
Right.
Nope.
So going to Louisiana.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. We reported, I think, a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, about their motion to put through their Senate the requirement for all public school classrooms to display the 10 Commandments. Now, of course, this has been contentious because the Constitution of the USA says that they mustn't support any particular religion.
Yeah.
And of course, in Canada, you can't, if you work for the state, you can't even wear a cross or anything that you've had a problem with this, haven't you?
That's in Quebec.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. So
what about Sikhs? Can they wear their turban?
Well, where are we talking about now?
Fred,
because
in Quebec, can a Sikh wear a turban?
Dred, do you know? I think you've gone frozen.
I think
Dred?
he's frozen, hasn't he?
Yeah.
It's cold in Canada.
Yes, it is. Especially where he is. He's working in close to the tundra, I think.
Okay.
So anyway, what's happened here is the new governor has pushed into law this requirement for poster-sized displays of the 10 Commandments in large, easily readable font in every classroom from kindergarten to state-funded universities. And he says he's justified it by saying his name is Governor Jeff Landry, and he's justified it by saying, if you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, who was Moses. He got the commandments from God.
Well, maybe this is not such a bad idea because, in my opinion, number one, I would welcome those posters, and I would also make a very big note on them that the 10 Commandments that we are all familiar with is a selection of the roughly 372 odd that, and I would make little arrows, and I would quote those other ones that we are less familiar with. I would display those very prominently as well, such as that you're not allowed to wear clothing of mixed fabrics, and you're not allowed to eat shellfish. And I would display those as brightly and popularly. And I would actually, in fact, as a teacher, I would insist that my little, imagine having a grade 4 or 5 class and having them read the 10 Commandments, the many thousand, 100 and whatever, reading all the commandments every day in proper English. I would just love that. I would love these recitals, and I would love these discussions about it. I would actually guarantee that within about 3 years, I'd have them all deconverted to some form of rationalist ideas. I would have stoning exercises in the yard. I mean, a la Monty Python. For what did you cover today? Did you cover your neighbor's crayons? Really? We shall have to have a stoning. I would have lots of fun with that.
Yeah, and of course you'd serve them prawn sandwiches for lunch, wouldn't you?
Somebody said
Well,
on
yeah,
Twitter. Somebody said on Twitter that all these kids are going to read, you shall not lie, you shall not steal, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and then their parents are all going to go and vote for Donald Trump.
Yes.
but I'm being facetious, but I actually do think this is. I would not. I would make it very clear if I were living in Louisiana, I would make it very clear that this is in breach of the what is that clause in the American
Constitution.
In the Constitution, there's a clause. I don't recall the name right now. I would make it clear that this is in breach of the Constitution.
Yeah. Well,
the separation clause. Is it the separation clause?
That's right. They're trying to get around that by saying that we're not going to use state funds to put these posters up. Not going to print them with state money. We're going to get donations.
But although I'm being facetious, I would very seriously use this as a sort of an inversion of what they're trying to do. And I would immediately begin research to see whether children's behavior in the schools actually change. Are there less examples of theft? Are there less examples of bullying? And this would give an opportunity to compare what happens in schools in Louisiana to schools in other states regarding kids' behavior. And it would actually be a brilliant opportunity for scientific research in to what extent does displaying and reading the 10 Commandments on a daily basis change people's behavior. So
they're not even a good list of standards to abide by, are they? Anyway,
no, for sure. Like in pastafarianism, we have the 8. I'd really rather you. Really rather you didn't.
Yes, you do.
So it becomes just as a guideline rather than as a imperative.
Yeah, you really only need do as you would be done by, and that's
pretty much
it is. Yeah.
Platinum rule.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to go to Missouri now, which is a state pretty close to the center of the US of A, where they have imposed near total abortion ban. You can't get, even if it's the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest, you can't get an abortion in Missouri. And amazingly, a group of clergy have attempted to, they've been making an effort to halt that total ban on abortion, which we didn't expect that of the clergy, did we? But they are doing that. Meanwhile, it went to court, and the judge rebuked the clergy for claiming that the law violates the state's constitution by imposing, this is the reason they gave. They said that it violates the constitution by imposing the religious values of one faith on all residents. That's the clergy's justification. But he said you can't do that. He's not allowed that case to go through. He rebuked the faith leaders' claim, and so we've still got.
On what basis?
Oh, no, don't ask me that. I don't know.
Oh.
What about something like an ectopic pregnancy? Are they allowed to terminate that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know, but this women's lives are being risked here, aren't they?
Again.
Yes.
Have you heard the podcast by John Ronson? Things Fell Apart, and he has a session about how evangelicals became anti-abortion.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And originally they weren't.
Yes.
Originally they were very relaxed about anti-abortion.
Yes.
And it was seen as a Catholic thing.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they had no problems with Roe versus Wade at the time.
Yes.
And then it kind of became a way to attack feminism, really.
Right.
Yes, it was seen as a political weapon, an
Yeah.
opportunity to coalesce around an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, John Ronson does a good job. Anyway, going to New York. There's a Brooklyn pastor who is flamboyant. He's known as the Bling Bishop. And he's just been sentenced to 9 years in prison for schemes that included preying on the bank account of one of his own followers. So his name, nobody's surprised again. His name is Lamore Whitehead. And he's got a very flashy lifestyle involving cars and clothing. And he used his position as a religious leader to fleece people out of their money to fund his lavish lifestyle.
I'm astonished.
Well, that's
That's a
news.
first.
But it's sad, though, because one of his victims, a member of his church, an old lady, gave him $90,000, her entire life savings, believing that he would use the money to get a home for her. He spent it on clothing and car payments.
Well, I suppose the good news is that he's actually been sentenced.
Yeah.
Which is that's the news. To me, the fact that this happened is not news at all, but that he has actually been sentenced.
Yes, that's good.
That's good, and it's news.
Yes. We applaud.
Yes, and it's quite a unique occurrence that somebody is actually being held accountable for preying on the
praying with an E.
Well, I'm convinced he did pray with an A as well. You know,
New York has done a good job, hasn't it, on this?
Yeah,
it's one of the more enlightened places in the US of A. So we're going to finish.
I wonder about the mentality of these people. Do they actually believe in what they profess and see themselves as exceptions, or are they just psychopaths who use this in order to, either get people's money or for access to women or access to children or whatever?
It's a spectrum.
I don't know. I don't know what is the mentality behind them. I guess they some of them are one and some of them are the other. Maybe some will start out with good intentions.
Yeah,
it's appalling, isn't it?
No doubt some of them have been deceived themselves. Yes.
Well, like Ponzi and Madoff, they didn't start out wanting to rip people off. They wanted to do good, and it just ate at them after a while. And, most people at heart are good, but, the choices they make lead them down a path sometimes that they feel they can't get out of,
Yeah.
Not that it's an excuse, but,
Thanks for that, Fred. I'm sorry we can't see you at the moment. Obviously, you don't have enough bandwidth, but I want to end the show by taking us to Canada, which is one of the more enlightened countries. And this is in Toronto. Take a look at this.
What's interesting about that is that there was another, so that is currently under an investigation by the RCMP. There was another van that was driving around with anti-Semitic language on it and playing anti-Semitic videos, and that is not under investigation. And the news outlets in Ontario have questioned the RCMP as to why one and not the other, and they refused to comment.
Well, thanks for that update, Dred. I was applauding. I was applauding because it reminded me of the atheist bus campaign that happened back in, I think it was 2013, that we had in London, and it went around the world. Lots of buses had these messages, and I was thinking this is a sort of high-tech version of that.
I have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I think there will be Muslim minorities in every country in the Western world. It's there, it's happening, they're here. And I do feel the more we demonize them, the more we other them, the more we push them into a corner, and the more they will see Islam as part of their identity because we're not welcoming them into our nation. And I think you've got a problem of polarization.
Yeah.
Between Muslims who are being squeezed into, which is what the terrorists want.
Yes, yes.
They want conflict between the Muslim minority and the rest.
Yeah.
And I think we have to accept there are Muslim minorities in all Western countries, and we have to live together.
I was,
I agree with you, Paul, but just like the Hamas, they don't see compromise. In many respects, it would be nice if it wasn't, Islam first, people second, because then it would be a lot easier for most people to accommodate different beliefs. But where I'm currently afraid myself that down the road, my Pastafarianism will be seen as a hate crime, and I'll be investigated for it. And just by virtue of the fact that, I make fun of them, and that just gets turned around. That gets turned around to mean something entirely different than what I would ever intend, and then it's it's a matter of public opinion.
I'm inclined to agree with Paul more than I do with either John and Dred in this case, and maybe I can enlighten our audience by recalling a conversation I recently had with my husband just before we had our national elections in South Africa. I had this very interesting conversation with several people, in fact, that I think democracy is stupid. I think we need at least a different type of democracy. But one of the conversations I had with my spouse was, he sort of said that, yes, it's dangerous to have the masses decide what happens, but we have to just hope that the masses do what we want them to do. We have to educate the masses to make the right choices. And I said, well, then you don't have a democracy, because you.
Yep.
What you're implying is that
if they could only see it my way.
If my team wins, then I like democracy. But if my team doesn't win, then I don't like democracy. And maybe while I am well aware of and also frightened and scared of Islam, and I don't think there is such a thing as a moderate modern Islam, and not modern. Moderate Islam. I think in essence Islam is fundamentalist to its core.
Yep.
But I agree with Paul that the messaging of we are under siege and wake up is not contributing to constructive conversations. Because if we want to live in a democracy, which is a topic for another day, then we have to realize it's a bit like free speech, bad speech should be countered with better speech, not limits on what people are allowed to say. And in South Africa, I'm actually an activist for freedom from religion as opposed to freedom of religion. And I'm in charge of a small organization that Cross Free, where we agitate to have crosses that is very common in South Africa in the last 5 years. It's become very common to have crosses put up in public places. So the slogan that I prefer is your right to have a cross in your church is as important as my right to not have crosses in public spaces. And I think that is perhaps a more constructive message than saying no crosses in public spaces, rather just change the emphasis a little bit. Because like Paul says, the more one goes into combat mode, the easier it is for fundamentalist organizations to get their bristles up and say, yes, look what they are doing to us.
Well, yeah, I would have been sympathetic towards that view up until quite recently. I would have been tolerant to a fault. But I don't think we can tolerate intolerance. And this is why the right are rising in Europe. I mean, look at Geert Wilders, who is attempting to bring in policies of deporting Muslims because they don't fit with the Dutch society. And it's natural when you're under threat to polarize and resist the threat. I regret it.
John, we have a problem in Britain of Islamist terrorism. There have been a number of atrocities, and there have been a much larger number of attempted atrocities, which have been foiled, thankfully, by the security services. Now, how did they foil them? I don't know, and I don't really want to know. It's not my business, but my bet is most of them were foiled because the security services have infiltrated these Islamic groups.
Yes.
And the only way they can infiltrate them is with loyal Muslims.
Yes. Yes.
You know, you can't infiltrate Islamic groups except through Muslims. There's no other way to do it. And we absolutely need these loyalist Muslims to protect us from the nutcases in our community. And, you know, Hamas, I'm 1000% against Hamas. You know, these people are Nazis, basically, in Islamic guise. But I worry about polarization. I mean, we've got Reform UK, which are rising up in the UK. And
I can understand. I can understand it, but I do worry about it. But I work with some activist, moderate Muslims. For example, Nuriya Khan was a speaker at the recent event that I staged in London, Changing Minds in Changing Times 24. And last year I staged an event in Birmingham at which, what's her name, spoke. Dearie me, I can't think of her name. But she's the leader of the British ex-Muslims Council. Yeah, Maria. No, come on, brain cell.
Mariam, isn't it? Mariam.
Miriam. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Yes, and also Momus Najmi, who was formerly a correspondent on the Global Atheist News Show. So I've been working with these people. Harris Sultan. Yeah, we need to empower moderate Muslims. Yeah,
and ex-Muslims too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will we help to empower moderate and ex-Muslims with messages like the one displayed on that truck? And I think that's the conversation that we need to have. And I'm not convinced that we will. It's just that the tone matters. And I am as much against the likes of Geert Wilders and as I am against the likes of Hezbollah. And I'm saying that as somebody who lives in a country who was ruled by fundamentalist Afrikaner Calvinists since 1948. The only time that I've ever felt threatened because of a view that I hold was when I was in high school and I was saying that I don't think apartheid is right. So I've never been in a one-on-one interaction. I've never been threatened by any Muslims, not even the most fundamentalist Muslims that I've met. So I just think we need to we need to beware of the tone of the messages, especially in this day and age where we have so much misinformation, and where when I see a message like that, I want to know who paid for it, who wrote it, what is the origin of it, because you get this thing of double speak where the message seems to be, yes, I like the message, but it's actually being produced by somebody who wants to create this. So I think we need to be extremely careful of how we turn these messages.
It is an eggshell walking experience, isn't it? But first of all, I want to say, Mariam Namazi. Mariam, I'm sorry that my brain didn't bring up your name immediately. I've drunk too much. So my apologies if you're watching this. But yes, what do we say here? How do you... The trouble is... Go ahead, Dred. Oh, you've lost connection. The trouble is, I mean, I'm against all stupid religions that believe in something that cannot be demonstrated and use it.
Well, I was just going to say that, just on that van thing, and
Oh, yep.
Am I there?
We could hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the van was paid for by the owner of the Ground News.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So just adding that.
Who is the Ground News?
Does he have a bias? Is he Christian or
no? The Ground News actually prides itself on identifying the sources of information and their political slants.
Yeah. Okay. And
that's interesting. Thank you for that, Dred.
Yes, indeed. And an opportunity to create a good headline, of course, because they're in the news business.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say that the trouble is just being blanket against religions is not something people can get passionate about. It's a very difficult message to get behind. Whereas being actually on the playing field of this team versus that team, that is something that you can sponsor.
Yep.
Right.
Which is exactly why I think we need to. That is why I think the message should not be that we are as much against religion as that we are against bad ideas, because atheists and non-religious people can also have extremely bad ideas.
Well, fair enough, but
absolutely
fair enough, but you've now removed it even further. You've gone a step back away from the problem to this nebulous bad idea-ness.
But I think the other thing we're against is we're against people imposing their ideas on others.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, if someone wants to have a religion, that's their business. I'm happy to debate it. I'm happy to disagree.
Yeah.
But if they impose their values on me, when it's values that I don't share,
yeah, that's right. So, Dred, I know you don't do this, but never dream of making us all wear tricorn hats, please. Guys, we've overrun. We have overrun. We've done an hour now, so I'm going to stop the show this, because you watch the algorithms and everybody drops off after 8 minutes. They've had enough. So yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, it's the world we live in, I'm afraid. Yeah.
It's the best part at the end.
Yes, yes. Well, there you go. I'll clip it. Okay. Thank you very much. You're appreciated by me at the very least, and hopefully by some viewers in future. Say bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that?